A boy is standing in the middle of an imperial court. He can't be more than 12. His robes don't fit the sleeves, swallow his hands, the hem drags across the stone floor, and he speaks with the practiced calm of someone who learned very early that rooms like this belong to whoever fills the silence first. The Emperor of Yamato sits on the throne 10 feet away. He is a grown man. He controls, nominally, the largest nation in what used to be Japan, and he is terrified of the child in front of him. What the boy is saying sounds like good news. A governor in the neighboring nation of Sei has defected. He wants to surrender. He's asking Yamato to come to him. And if Yamato moves fast enough, if the emperor just says yes right now, before anyone has time to think they can seize the province, before Sei's new dictator can respond, it sounds clean, it sounds like an opportunity. Across the room, General Mitsuhide Rumon knows exactly what it is. He has a name for it, an ancient stratagem, documented in the same books that made a 15-year-old farm worker the most dangerous man in Yamato. You wound yourself, or you wound someone you control. Then you use the wound to earn the enemy's trust, and you let them walk into the jaws of a trap, wearing the face of mercy. Rumon says this out loud, to the emperor, with the quiet urgency of a man who has already calculated what happens if he's ignored. The emperor nods. Then he does exactly what the boy wants. This is Nippon Sangoku. And the thing you need to understand before any of this makes sense is that the boy in the ill-fitting robes is not the most dangerous person in that room. The most dangerous person is the one who taught him how to read it. 100 years ago, Japan ended. Not in the way nations usually end. No single defeat. No single catastrophe that could be mourned and moved past. It was cumulative. Nuclear war on the other side of the world drove a wave of refugees toward the islands. The refugees brought a virus. The virus broke the health system. Then the earthquake broke everything else, and whatever was left, the government taxed into famine. The people revolted. The revolt succeeded in the way that revolutions sometimes succeed when there's nothing left to lose, meaning they tore down the old structure and had no blueprint for what came next. What came next was 3 kingdoms: Yamato in the west, Takeo to the north, Sei beyond the straits. And because the technology went with the civilization, the satellites, the servers, the infrastructure, what replaced it looked like the Meiji era, dressed in the bones of skyscrapers. Samurai in the ruins of the modern world, not metaphorically, actually. This is the world Alteru Misumi was born into. He's 15 when the story starts. Agricultural officer in the province of Ehime, deep in Yamato's interior. He's responsible for crop yields and land surveys, and the kind of administrative work that keeps a village alive without anyone noticing. He is also, quietly, one of the most well-read people alive, because the library survived the catastrophe even when the people didn't, and Alteru read everything in them: the art of war, agricultural manuals, political philosophy, bridal magazines, everything, indiscriminately, with the absorption of someone who understood from a young age that information was the only resource that couldn't be taxed away. But here's the thing about Alteru at 15. He doesn't want any of it. The knowledge, the strategy, the potential that everyone around him can almost see radiating off him, none of it means anything to him next to the life he already has. Because he has Saki. Saki Higashimachi grew up with him. Her father raised him after his parents died. They married young, the way people do, when the future is uncertain and the present is all you can hold. She wears a white dress to the wedding because it makes her feel beautiful, a custom so old it's looped around from ancient to modern again. She calls it her way of reclaiming something. She calls Alteru her way of believing the country could be better. She is fierce and thorned and funny and convinced completely, unshakably convinced that the man she married could reunify Japan if he ever got off his knees long enough to stand up. He does not want to stand up. He wants to build a vegetable garden and watch the seasons change and wake up next to her every morning until he is old. That is the life Denki Taira takes from him in a single afternoon. Taira arrives the way corruption always arrives, with ceremony. A procession of horses, banners, the trappings of power assembled to remind the village that power is watching them. He is the lord of home affairs, the true ruler of Yamato, behind the puppet emperor on the throne. He collects taxes personally, in the way that men who enjoy cruelty prefer to do things personally. His tax collectors move through the village before him, and one of them beats a farmer bloody in the street for being short on payment. Another peasant drops a potato. It falls from a wooden crate as he prostrates himself on the road. It rolls to a stop against Taira's sandal. Taira pauses, considers, and has the man quartered by 4 horses. Not as punishment, as a statement. A reminder that the space between living and not living is exactly as wide as Denki Taira's patience, and not a single step wider. Saki watches this and cannot stay quiet. That is who she is. She steps between a tax collector and a villager, and she speaks, with the particular kind of courage that doesn't calculate the cost first. She calls Taira fatty, not once, multiple times, with a specific, targeted repetition of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Alteru watches her. He wants to intervene. He cannot move, because he understands in the bone-deep way that understand what the calculus is. If he steps in, he dies. If he draws a weapon, she dies faster. The math of violence in a hierarchical system is never in favor of the person standing up to it. So he freezes. He tells himself this is strategy. He tells himself he's protecting her. That night, Saki is pulled from their home in the dark. Aoteru wakes to snow. The soldiers are shoveling it at the edge of the road. It's already red. Denki Taira is standing outside, in the early morning, cold, unhurried, holding a box. He presents it to Alteru with the manners of a man delivering a gift. The box contains Saki's head. The tax collector, standing behind Taira, tells Alteru that the rest of her body is somewhere else, implying this cheerfully. Inside Alteru's mind and the animation makes this visible, visceral, frame by horrible frame he kills them. He goes through every method, he calculates every approach, he feels every version of it, the particular fantasy of violence that a person reaches for when they cannot accept that they are powerless. And then he chooses something else. He stops himself, not from grief, not from fear, from a decision. A cold, clear, devastating decision. That killing Taira here changes nothing. The system that produced Taira produces the next one. Violence against a single man is not justice. It's just a substitution. And Saki did not die so that he could swap one corpse for another. He demands to know his wife's crimes. Taira tells him she called him fatty and obstructed tax collection. Alteru listens. And then, standing in the snow next to a box containing his wife's head, he begins to work the logic of it. He recounts the exact conversation Saki had with the collector. When she said fatty, she never specified who she meant. The collector assumed it was Taira, which means the collector is the one who chose that interpretation, which means the legal liability exists in the assumption, not the word. In a single exchange, Alteru turns the situation enough degrees that Taira is left looking at a 15-year-old farm boy and recognizing, with visible discomfort, that something is looking back at him that doesn't behave like prey. It's not revenge, it's barely even defiance. But it is the first move in a game Alteru has just decided to play. He buries what remains of Saki. He makes her a promise, the only one that matters. A peaceful world. One where men like Denki Taira cannot do what was done to her ever again. Not because they're stopped, because the systems that give them power no longer exist. He will dismantle it from the inside. He will be patient. He will be relentless. He will use every book he ever read and every calculation he can run and every word he can speak to build the thing Saki believed he could build. He will reunify Japan. Then he packs a bag and walks to Osaka. Osaka is where Borderland General Mitsuhide Ryumon runs his operation. Ryumon is one of the few power centers in Yamato that operates at a distance from Taira's direct control. He commands the Borderland General Corps, the military force that sits between Yamato and Sei, and he runs it with a competence and genuine concern for his nation that makes him genuinely dangerous to a man like Taira, who needs incompetence below him to stay on top. To serve under Ryumon is to work inside the only institution in Yamato that functions on merit. To get in, you have to pass the Torumon. The Torumon is an employment exam. The condition is simple. You must bring Ryumon to his knees. That's it. No further clarification. Alteru arrives in Osaka and finds a room in the cheapest hotel that has space. He does not sleep. He is not the kind of person who sleeps on the first night in a new place when there's a problem to solve. And almost immediately, the problem arrives at his door in the form of Yoshitsune Asama. Yoshitsune is everything Alteru is not. He is tall, composed, dressed like a man who inherited all the right names. He is the heir to the Asama family, one of Yamato's old military dynasties, and he moves through the world with the complete ease of someone who has never had to wonder whether the room belongs to him. He carries a sword and he knows how to use it, and he has assembled around himself a collection of followers who confirm, loudly and constantly, that he is brilliant and destined for greatness. Alteru finds all of this completely unimpressive and says so. There is a dynamic that forms between them immediately, not rivalry exactly, and not friendship exactly. Something more interesting. Yoshitsune has never met anyone who didn't reflexively defer to him, and Alteru represents a kind of cognitive friction that the sycophants never provided. Alteru, for his part, recognizes that Yoshitsune is genuinely exceptional, in ways that the flattery obscures rather than reveals. The two of them are going to the same place, and they both know it. Near the end of their first meeting, a man, unstable, armed, apparently pushed past some edge by the chaos of the streets outside attacks. The moment is resolved by the time it would take most people to process that it's happening. Yoshitsune's sword removes the man's arm below the elbow, clean as geometry, without Yoshitsune appearing to have moved at all. This is also unimpressive to Alteru, who has already started thinking about the exam. The Torimon is not a combat test. That's the first thing he identifies. The condition bring Ryumon to his knees is a philosophical question wearing the clothes of a military one. Bringing a man to his knees can mean defeat. It can mean submission. It can mean something that has nothing to do with physical force. Alteru spends the night working through the framing until he finds the leverage point. Yoshitsune's approach is more direct. If the man must be on his knees, remove whatever is keeping him upright. Yoshitsune is, in this sense, consistent. He is a sword, and the world is a problem that swords solve. When they face Ryumon together, the exam becomes something neither of them fully expected, a confrontation that requires both of them for different reasons. The show doesn't hand us the answer to how they pass. What it shows is the moment they stop competing and start operating as a unit, which is itself the answer. Ryumon is testing for more than knowledge. He's testing for the thing that survives when knowledge fails. And what survives when knowledge fails is the ability to think alongside someone who thinks differently. They pass, but passing is just a door. What's on the other side of the door is the third episode's real subject, and it has nothing to do with either of them. Denki Taira does not appear in the Toryumon exam. He doesn't need to. He is present in everything else in the institutional rot that makes the exam necessary, in the fear that keeps the emperor compliant, in the logic that says power belongs to whoever accumulates enough of it to make resistance irrational. Episode 3 spends half its runtime on a single political confrontation inside the imperial court, and it is one of the most unsettling sequences in the show, not because of violence, but because of what it reveals about how violence doesn't need to be present to control a room. The confrontation is over the nation of Sei. Yamato has issued a demand for unconditional surrender to its neighbor. Sei has been destabilized by an unusually brutal winter food shortages, civil unrest, the particular fragility of a government that never had much popular support to begin with. Taira reads this as an opportunity. Ryumon reads this as a moment that requires patience. The two men want completely opposite things, and so they fight the battle they always fight, which is the battle for the ear of Emperor Fuji III. Fuji III is young. He is not stupid. He might, in different circumstances, have been a reasonable ruler. But reasonable rulers require institutional structures that protect them long enough to develop judgment, and Fuji III was never given that protection. He grew up surrounded by Taira's apparatus, watching what happened to people who disagreed with Denki Taira. The lesson he learned is not complicated, and it is not wrong. What it has made of him is a man who governs from the back of the room, who agrees with whoever spoke last, who processes every political situation through the filter of personal safety first. Taira knows this. He has been exploiting it for years. Ryumon presents his assessment carefully. Yamato is not ready for a direct engagement with Sei. The winter has weakened them, yes, but weakness breeds desperation, and a desperate Sei is more dangerous than a stable one. The prudent move is restraint. Taira calls the assessment cowardice. This is not an argument. It is a social maneuver, the framing of military caution as personal weakness in front of an audience that includes the emperor, so that agreeing with Ryumon becomes, for Fuji III, an act of public humiliation. The emperor shifts in his seat, and then Taira presses. He is masterful at this, at sensing the exact moment when pressure will produce compliance, at applying it with just enough force that capitulation feels like the person's own choice. Fuji agrees. The surrender demand stands. The episode punctuates this with one of its most characteristic images, the emperor in the aftermath of the confrontation, visibly soiled from fear. It is played as grotesque comedy. It is also the most honest thing in the room. Every other person in that court has amassed dignity, authority, composure, power. Fuji's mask fails in the most undeniable way possible. What remains is just a person who is frightened and cannot say so. Alteru watches this somewhere in the background of the institution that just accepted him. He is learning something that no book in any library could have taught him. That the system he intends to destroy from the inside operates almost entirely on the management of fear, and that the people maintaining it are experts. But here is what the system doesn't know yet. Here is what Denki Taira, for all his expertise, did not calculate when he looked at a 15-year-old farm boy standing next to a box in the snow. Alteru Misumi is not afraid. He's been through the worst thing. He has already lost what he could not bear to lose. There is nothing left for the system to threaten him with, and a man with nothing to lose is the one thing a fear-based power structure cannot manage. 3 years pass. They pass in the space between episodes, carried by a single title card. 3 years under Ryumon changes a person. Not obviously, Alteru doesn't become harder or colder in the ways that war changes the men who survive it. He becomes more precise. The knowledge he accumulated in a rural library is now being tested against real military operations, real political scenarios, real stakes. He is rising through competence, through the kind of steady usefulness that hierarchies reward even when they don't intend to, and he is doing it deliberately with the patience of a man who knows that reaching the level of power he needs will take time that cannot be hurried. Yoshitsune, who everyone now calls Sune, with the particular shortening of names that marks real familiarity, is rising beside him. Their dynamic has settled into something functional and strange. Tsune is more impulsive, more willing to act before the full analysis is complete. Alteru waits, calculates, and often drives Tsune half mad with his refusal to move before the moment is right. They complement each other in ways neither of them would choose to admit. Ryumon sees all of this clearly. Yasuaki Kaku, Ryumon's strategist, sees it even more clearly. Kaku is the intelligence behind the Borderland General's operations, the one who translates Ryumon's vision into operational reality, who identifies threats before they fully materialize, who has the particular and uncomfortable gift of seeing people's motivations before the people themselves have articulated them. He is watching Alteru the way that experts watch each other with recognition and something that functions like respect, and a careful awareness that Alteru is not yet finished becoming what he's going to become. In Sei, something is breaking. Yamato's ultimatum landed in a nation already fracturing. The old Sei government, which never had real popular support, begins to crack under the combined pressure of the harsh winter, Yamato's threat from the west, and the political organizing happening in the country's interior. The embers of rebellion that have been burning quietly for months ignite. The government falls not in a battle but in a single night, replaced by something faster and more ruthless than anything that preceded it. Oga Wajima. She is the dictator Sei chooses for itself. And the word chooses is important here. She doesn't seize power through force alone. She captures it through something more durable, the genuine belief of her people that she is different. She moves through crowds the way water moves through rock, finding every gap, wearing it wider. She speaks to the Sei people's exhaustion with the previous government, not as an abstract political position, but as a personal wound she shares with them. She establishes her administration overnight, declares her intentions across the land, and within days has more popular momentum than the old government accumulated in years. And she immediately turns that momentum toward Yamato. The campaign she announces is framed as defense. Yamato sent a surrender demand. Yamato threatened their sovereignty. Yamato's imperial ambitions are the knife at Sei's throat, and Oga Wajima is the one willing to grab the blade. The crowd responds to this the way crowds always respond to someone who makes their fear feel righteous, with the particular, accelerating energy of people who have found a direction for what they were already feeling. Back in Yamato, Ryumon reads the intelligence report on Oga with the measured concern of someone who recognizes a symmetrical threat. She has implemented a soldier-farmer system in Sei, the same system Alteru has been advocating for within Yamato. She is doing, from the outside, what Alteru is trying to do from the inside. The irony is not lost on either of them. Oga vehemently opposes Yamato's terms for reunification. Not unification as a concept, the show is careful about this. What she opposes is the specific form Yamato is offering, which is less reunification and more absorption. Less shared nation, more conquered province. And in that specific objection, something complicated becomes visible. She and Alteru may want the same future. The path they're walking to it will turn them into enemies. Neither of them knows this yet, but the audience does. And that's the real unsettling thing about episode 4, not the political maneuvering, not the military buildup, but this. Two people with overlapping visions, separated by a border that's about to become a battlefield, moving toward each other with no knowledge of what they'll find when they arrive. In Yamato, the Taira's net keeps tightening. Alteru watches. He stays patient. He buries the urgency under everything else and keeps working, because the right moment has not yet arrived. In Sei, Oga Wajima builds an army. The war is no longer a threat, it is a schedule. Ryumon delivers the news in the way that experienced military commanders deliver news they already know the implications of, without editorializing in the flattest possible voice, so the facts can do what facts do when they're given enough space. Sei's government was overthrown a month ago. Oga Wajima now controls the nation. Ryumon requests permission to position troops along the border immediately, a defensive measure, prudent, proportional, the exact kind of response that loses wars slowly rather than quickly. Denki Taira intervenes. He calls the report false. He calls Ryumon's request premature. He smiles, with the practiced ease of a man who has spent decades watching people respond to his smile and adjusting its calibration accordingly. And then the door opens, and his son walks in. Tonotsugu Taira is 12 years old. He is dressed in the robes of an imperial archivist, robes that do not fit him, that were sized for a larger body, that he wears anyway because the title is real and the authority is real, even when the person carrying it looks like a child playing in someone else's clothes. He is the Grand Archivist of Yamato. He was given the position because his father holds enough power to give his son an imperial title, and Emperor Fuji holds too little will to refuse. Tonotsugu presents his intelligence. Muton Nagao, the chief negotiator of Sei and the governor of Kaga province, has defected. He wants to surrender to Yamato. He is offering his province as a foothold. All Yamato needs to do is send troops and supplies to Kaga immediately, before Oga Wajima can respond. Emperor Fuji looks at the boy in the enormous robes and the scroll, and the precise, rehearsed delivery of good news. Ryumon speaks very carefully. He identifies the stratagem by name, self-torture, an ancient ploy documented in the same text that Alteru has memorized and that Ryumon has deployed. You wound yourself, or you wound someone you control, to manufacture credibility with the enemy. Nagao's apparent defection is almost certainly not a defection. It is bait. Sei is holding the province open like a mouth and waiting for Yamato to walk into it. The emperor nods at Ryumon. Then he agrees to everything Tonotsugu asked for. The orders are issued. Tonotsugu to lead 30,000 troops to Kaga. Ryumon to provide 5,000 of his own men in support. The math of this is not subtle. Taira is sending Ryumon's forces into what Ryumon has just identified as a potential trap, and if the trap closes, Ryumon's reputation and resources suffer the damage. It is possible Taira knows this is a trap and doesn't care. It is possible Taira set the whole thing in motion himself. The show doesn't resolve this. What it gives instead is Tonosugu's expression as the orders are confirmed, a 12-year-old's version of satisfaction, which is somehow more disturbing than the adult kind. Back in Osaka, Ryumon convenes the full Borderland General Corps. He lays out the situation. He explains the deployment orders, and then, with the entire room watching, he says, "Hold the fort." The room does not understand this. Alteru immediately notes the problem aloud. Why gather everyone? Why lay out the full strategic picture if the instruction at the end is simply to remain in place? Sune is less analytical and more direct about his frustration. "This is not the moment," Alteru tells him quietly. "Not yet." The chief clerk, Kinta Morimiya, is the one who breaks rank. He stands and argues with genuine passion, with what sounds like moral clarity, that the right move is to ally with Sei, to abandon Yamato's corrupt leadership, to surrender to Oga Wajima, who is, by the reports filtering through from Sei, a righteous leader, a benevolent one, someone whose face you could trust, someone whose cause you could believe in. The room listens. Some of them agree, because the argument isn't wrong. Exactly, Taira's Yamato is corrupt, and Oga's Sei presents itself as its opposite. The appeal is not irrational. Kaku steps forward. What Kaku does next is less a counter-argument than a dissection. He doesn't contest Oga's charisma or even her intentions. He removes the emotional content from the room entirely and replaces it with mechanics. The question is not whether Oga Wajima is admirable. The question is what any leader gains from being perceived as admirable, and whether that perception was engineered for consumption or emerged organically. Every piece of Oga's public conduct, Kaku demonstrates, follows the same pattern: action calculated for maximum emotional return, not goodness. Performance of goodness at scale, because the performance builds loyalty faster than the reality does. The face tattoo, the public declarations, the overnight seizure of power reframed as the people's will. All of it is not evidence of evil. It is evidence of intelligence. And an intelligent person with military aspirations who has manufactured the devotion of an entire nation is not less dangerous because she's doing it attractively. Morimiya is sentenced to exile. The men who sided with him are pardoned because Ryumon understands the difference between followers and instigators, and because burning loyalty is a resource cost, he won't pay twice. Then Ryumon and Kaku take their 30,000 and march for Kaga. Alteru and Sune are left behind with the headquarters, with instructions to hold. They stand at the edge of what the show has built across 5 episodes and look at the horizon, where 2 armies and a dictator and an emperor's compliance and a 12-year-old's ambitions are all converging on a single province in the middle of winter. And Alteru is thinking you can see it in the stillness the animation gives him that is different from paralysis. That is the stillness of a calculation running too fast to be visible on the surface. Ryumon told them everything. He laid out the full picture. He told them to stay. He told them everything. That means staying is not the plan. Staying is the setup. Whatever Ryumon is anticipating the Taira trap closing, Kaga revealing itself as the ambush Ryumon warned about, some third move that neither Oga nor Taira has shown yet. Alteru and Sune are positioned for it. Not excluded. Pre-positioned. The question is what they're waiting for, and the answer is still moving toward them from the direction of Sei. Because Oga Wajima built her power on the performance of righteousness, and performance, unlike conviction, has a cost. You can sustain it when everything is going your way. The test of it is what happens when the next move requires her to do something her people can't see. And whatever Mutanagao's real situation is in Kaga, one thing is certain: Oga Wajima put him there, which means she can see the board from a position no one in Yamato has fully mapped yet. 30,000 Yamato soldiers are walking into a province that might be a mouth. 5,000 of Ryumon's own are walking in behind them, and 2 men who passed an impossible exam by understanding that the answer was never in the question are sitting in Osaka, watching the direction where the news will eventually come from. Everything Saki believed about Alteru Misumi, every conversation she had with him about what he could build if he would only stand up, is alive in that stillness. It hasn't been the same since the morning in the snow, but it hasn't gone quiet either. It is the current underneath everything he does, the reason every calculation is made, the weight in every decision to wait rather than act. He promised her a peaceful world. Peaceful worlds are not built from peace. They are built from the understanding of everything that prevents it. And right now, in the winter of Yamato's first real war, Alteru Misumi is learning every piece of what he'll eventually need to take apart. If you think you've seen the shape of this story, the hero rises, the tyrant falls, the nation heals, you haven't. Because what Nippon Sangoku is actually about is the distance between a promise and the person capable of keeping it. Alteru is not there yet. He is 5 episodes into a life that requires him to become something he does not yet have a word for. And the people who stand in his way are not simply obstacles, they are mirrors. Taira, Oga, even Ryumon. Each of them represents a version of power that Alteru will have to decide what to do with. What happens when 30,000 soldiers walk into Kaga is going to answer a question this show has been building since the first episode. Not who wins the battle, but whether winning the battle means anything in a war that nobody is close to understanding yet. Subscribe, because the story Nippon Sangoku is telling is not one you can stop halfway through.